Hello, 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 dear listeners. Welcome to Achtung Millwall. As you well know, this season Achtung is doing a partnership with Pundit Games, punditgames.co.uk, the number one ultimate football quiz game, board game, answering questions on football. What more can you want out of this life? And ahead of each of our shows this season, we're asking one question from the vast selection of genres and eras and types of football subject that they have in the pundit games. So we're going to ask a question now, just to give you a little taster as to what kinds of delights await you should you buy your significant other, son, daughter, mates this particular ball game. It's a great game. So here's a question. Answer at the end of the show. This is a rags to riches story. An Englishman who was over 27 when he made his debut in the Premier League. And of the 29 players who've scored over 100 Premier League goals, only Ian Wright has made his debut later than this Leicester legend. You're getting it already, listeners, aren't you? This larger-than-life character scored in a record-breaking 11 straight matches during Leicester's incredible title-winning campaign. The top scorers in the Premier League of 2019 have Mr. X with 23 goals, playing for Leicester City, in front of Aubameyang of Arsenal, 22, Danny Ings of Southampton with 22, Raheem Sterling of Manchester City, and Mohamed Salah with 19 goals. A rags to riches story, played for Leicester. Guys, you got it already. Answer at the end of the show if you need it, dear listeners.
You're listening to AchtungMillwall, broadcasting from the beautiful South Bermondsey. Accept no substitute.
Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to a preview edition of Achtung Millwall, the number one Millwall podcast, I think it is, in my unbiased opinion. My name is Nick Hart. You're listening to a pre-Swansea City at home edition, a mix between a preview show and a look back into the past, as we tried to do on these little dainties that I set before you for your delectation ahead of Saturday's game. Is it a must-win game Saturday? It's not a must-win in any direct sense, but it's certainly the kind of fixture, dear listeners, that we really do or should be looking to take 3 points from. Swansea City, fallen from the heights. I was just reading their history. Obviously, you got not that long ago, the Premier League, the Europa Cup, Brendan Rodgers, Carlos Kickerball, and all sorts of names playing beautiful football for them, and they've fallen down to the depths at the moment of 21st position in the Championship. They've won just one game so far this season, drawn 3 and lost 4. Scored a few goals, 2 more goals than we have, 10 goals, but conceded 12. So the Lions, by contrast, are in 11th after last week's battling, as the BBC calls it, battling performance, the 0-0 draw at West Bromwich Albion. I don't know if I'd call it battling, listeners. I don't know how you'd see it. Lucky would be my choice of, description for last week's game, particularly during the course of the second half. I know that, we put in a bit of a defensive masterclass, that back line of Murray Wallace, more about him shortly, Jake Cooper and Ryan Leonard. But it was, hanging on for grim death at times. Every man, all men to the pumps. West Brom hit the crossbar twice. Some great point-blank saves by Bart Bielkowski. Where does luck start and skillful defence begin, I don't know. But certainly I thought we rode our luck up there at the Hawthorns last week. But the BBC have done us a kind turn, described as a battling 0-0 draw at West Brom. That's left us in 11th position. But to make my point, I really do believe that Saturday's game at home to Swansea is the kind of game we really ought to be winning if we've got any ambitions at all of finishing higher than respectable mid-table. Injuries, dear listeners, just looking at the second tier Twitter feed, Swansea's new signing, Josh Ginelli, I don't know him, is set to miss the rest of the season through injury. So they've signed him and then he's got injured. That sounds familiar, doesn't it, dear listeners? Nathan Wood and Joe Allen are also out until January. Anyway, he's out for the season, so they've got their own set of problems, dear listeners, haven't they? But yeah, from the Millwall perspective, it's a game we really ought to be winning. But I mean, we talk about injuries, don't we? But joining the ranks of the casualties at Calmont Road this week, Murray Wallace. Apparently, he took a knock up there at West Brom last weekend. Apparently, George Honeyman is, as a consequence of the carnage at Calmont, George Honeyman has been fast tracked back to the first team, according to Richard Cowley on the London News Online network. Reports that Mill's injury issues could see George Honeyman put back into the first team fold slightly sooner than anticipated. The former Sunderland and Hull midfielder has been out since July, a pre-season friendly, suffering a quad injury. I don't know how we're going to fast track him back if he's injured, and he hasn't. I don't know how much training he would have done, match level training. I don't know, unless we've got some kind of Joe 90 style matter transmitter or something tucked away at Calmont Road. I don't know how we're going to fast track him, but anyway, probably what that means effectively, listeners, is we're going to play him with the risk of further injuries, joining potentially the likes of Kevin Nisbet, Sean Hutchinson, Matthias Sarkic, and now dear old Murray Wallace. We don't have a huge squad, do we? And the depth of injury crisis we've got going on at the moment is making a real dent in matters. Huge amounts of online criticism of Gary Rowett, some of his decisions to loan out the likes of Chin Coley, who's doing very well at Bromley, Alex Mitchell, doing very well at Lincoln, leaving us short with a bit of a lashed up back line. I presume that this may mean the introduction of Wes Harding into the back line. If Murray's out on Saturday, I presume it's going to be a Harding, Cooper and Leonard. Long may he continue in good health. Pray to whichever deity you fancy to keep that going. But it does have a bit of a lashed up feel. Am I alone in feeling that this has got a bit of a sellotape and wing and a prayer quality to the back line? Tom Bradshaw's injured. I'd missed him out just reading through the piece by Richard Corley. Just reading through Alex Gracie's 4 takeaways from Millwall's 0-0 draw at West Brom. Back-to-back clean sheets, says Alex, but the second half was tough viewing. It was tough viewing. Like I said at the start of the show, I thought we rode our luck, and you can only do that for so long. And we missed numerous chances, didn't we, in the first half, including, of course, the Zian Fleming penalty. I thought Zian, up until that point, was looking brighter, but he does fade so easily. He does fade when his head drops, and that's a problem for you, Zian, if you're listening to the show, mate. I think maybe players do, because I would. If I was in the squad, I'd want to know what people are saying. You cannot let your head drop to that level so easily if you seriously aspire to play at the top level, because that's part of the game you have to contend with. Injuries, we've mentioned injuries already, Alex. Ryan Leonard shows his worth, says Alex Grace. God almighty, doesn't he just? He was a record signing when he first arrived with us, I believe, under Neil Harris, wasn't it? And obviously another player that's contended with injury in recent times a lot. So far, touch wood, got my rabbit's foot. A bit of lucky heather here for your listeners. So far, Ryan Leonard is being well preserved by the medical team at Calmont Road. He keeps his fitness. Long may that continue. I don't know where we'll be if he falls under the heel of the butcher's table at Calmont. Away form is encouraging, says Alex Grace, as the home form has faltered. Yeah, regular theme on these shows, probably a regular theme of discussion around the Millwall scene generally is our relatively poor home form. Was it 6 wins since January? Did I say in the last show? I haven't got the stat to hand. I'm blagging this show, rather, listeners. It's all being done on the hoof. But anyway, not many wins since the start of 2023. I've gone back in my mind now. I'm back with the 10 years ago, like the Pink Floyd song says. How do we get into this position? Many fans will say, due to Gary Rowett's choice of tactics. I suppose, the answer to those critics, and I read the same feeds that you do, dear listener, is that we're sitting in 11th position at the moment, and that means we're just 2 points behind the sixth placed Leeds United in sixth place on 13 points. A win tomorrow against Swansea, who sit just above the bottom 3 relegation spots, puts us in with a shout of top 6. I mean, it's mad. I mean, I think I saw an interview with Casper Donachie in which he described the Championship as a mad, well, I can't remember how he put it. He might say crazy league. He probably said crazy league. Maybe I'll say crazy league as well, because probably shouldn't use the word mad, really, without going all woke on your listeners. So yeah, a win tomorrow, and we'll certainly be in with a shout of the magical top 6. Don't ask me, because I mean the quality of play that we're seeing at the moment doesn't go with that sentence, does it? That's any Mill fan that's been following the Lions for any length of time, certainly the last couple of seasons, must have an underlying sense of unease about the home form and the quality of some of the play. That said, everyone, the experts, the online Twitterati, seem to feel we're a very difficult team to beat, and we've been beaten 3 times this season, so I don't know. Any road, we'll see how we get on Saturday, but I thought what I would do as part of this mini preview is to cast our glances backwards in time, as is the way of this show. We do like to set the current period in the context of history, because you can always learn so much, and there's also very little that's new in this world. So I'm going to cast your mind back, dear listeners, not that far, actually. The fixture I've chosen from previous visits of Swansea City to the Den is only back as far as 2007, which is, what's that, 16 years ago. Now, I don't know about you, I don't know how old you are, dear listener, but I find increasingly 16 years seems like just yesterday. When you're young, 16 years seems like a lifetime to you, doesn't it? But now, 16 years seems like a very recent period of time indeed. But it does the same. That said, you're putting your mind back to the Willie Donachie era. This would be the season of 2006 to 7, League One. Millwall finished in 10th position that particular season in League One, having been relegated, of course, during the chaos, utter chaos of 2005-06. Anyone that lived through that period will probably never forget it. It certainly left me a little bit scarred by it all. We had manager on manager week after week, didn't we? Colin Lee, Tull. We were lurching both at the top in the boardroom. Theo Paphitis was neither here nor gone. And I think we had, what was his name? Oh God, Stuart Till. Anyone remember Stuart Till? We had Peter de Savary at one point. I'm just looking at the squad that season. 40-odd players. So anyway, they were relegated at the end of the 2005-06 season to find ourselves in League One. It was a so-so season, in truth. This was a late season win over Swansea by 2-0 at the Den in front of 9,249. We were never really in with a shout of any immediate bounce back into the Championship, from which we dropped the previous season. League position through the whole of 2007 from January onwards, to be honest, hovering not that far above the bottom 4 positions, 19th there on January the 1st, 2007. We would finish 10th, as I said, and this win over Swansea would reinforce us in 11th position. So we were clear of relegation by this stage. The Mill team that put 2 goals past Swansea City on the 31st of March 2007. Some names here for you, dear listeners. Lenny Pidgley in goal, Alan Dunn, Tony Craig, Paul Robinson, Richard Shaw, Dave Brammer in midfield, Chris Hackett, Ryan Smith, Darren Byfield up front, remember him? Neil Harris, who can ever forget Neil Harris, and Danny Sender. Some substitutions. Paul Huberts would actually come in for Byfield quite early in the game in this particular fixture. He came in for Byfield in the 2nd minute, presumably injury. Marvin Elliott came in for Chris Hackett in the 57th minute, and then Neil Ardley came in for Donachie in the 79th minute. One yellow card for Dave Brammer in the 51st minute. Goals were scored both by, it was a brace for Neil Harris, 31st minute of the first half, and then a penalty in the 70th minute. Now, I've not been able to find any kind of match reports of any kind online. Nothing on YouTube other than some very jerky mobile phone footage from a Swansea City end perspective of crowd hollering and hooting in the streets of Bermondsey, as I think they were, inviting it on afterwards outside the Den, and also a very jerky bit of footage of Neil Harris's penalty. I think that was at the Coldblow Lane end to make it 2-0. So not really a huge amount of reportage that I can quote back here. I would have been at this game, but I can't remember it in all truth. I don't know if you can, dear listeners. I had a vague sense of seeing Willie in goal for Swansea City. That's about the only thing I can remember from this particular fixture. Otherwise, it's one that's passed me by, largely speaking. But Willie Guerre, one of our much-loved goalkeepers, always here as a understudy for Tony Warner during the promotion season of 2000-2001, of course. I think he only made a few appearances for us, Willie, didn't he? But he was in the Swansea side that day. There one other name that leapt out at me who would come on to Millwall later is Richard Duffy, who would come in as a substitute for Ian Craney for the Swans. But until March of this year, this 2-0 win in March of 2007 was actually the last time we'd beat Swansea at the Den until this year, March 2023. Bit of a hoodoo side, really. They would obviously have better times. They would, as we've said, reach the Premier League. They'd go into Europe and became known as this kind of beautiful football continental side, which is kind of a strange turn of events, but that's the footballing reputation they developed for themselves under the likes of Brendan Rodgers, playing the ball around, continental type football. Now, they've obviously fallen far from those times, and at the moment they sit just above the relegation spot. But it's been quite a journey for Swansea City, and they would not long have moved into their new ground, the Liberty Stadium, if it's still called that. I think they may have changed it for sponsorship reasons, but they moved into that in 2005. So by the time of this fixture, they'd only just taken ownership of their stadium by 2 years. Now, I picked out a few names from the Millwall lineup that day. Paul Huberts, we've mentioned already. He actually had a good season for us this year. He played 2006-07, 38 games for the Lions, 10 goals. That's not a bad return for a reasonably unknown Danish centre-forward. His career took in a number of different Danish sides, including Aalborg, before arriving at Millwall, then going on to Northampton in August of 2007. Just reading the biography from Neil Fissler's Millwall A to Z book. It says Paul was a long striker was a striker with long legs and an unelegant style. That's a great turn of phrase, Neil. An unelegant style, who became popular with Millwall fans. He was very popular, wasn't he? I think it was the deep love that we have at the Den for a player that may not be the most skillful, but is a trier. That's the kind of thing we love. By the time he arrived at the Den, Neil says he'd enjoyed some success in his homeland, winning promotion with the team Farum in the Danish Super League. But despite wanting to extend his contract at the Den, Willie Donachie didn't want him. Northampton took the chance of keeping him in England, and he became the leading scorer with 13 goals for Northampton, for the Cobblers. Paul now lives back in his native Roskilde in Denmark, where he owns a clothes shop and is a cinema manager. And in a match against Millwall on January the 1st, 2008, was sent off after a clash with ex-teammate Neil Harris. So a fiery character, Paul Huberts. I remember him quite fondly. I wasn't at that Northampton game, so I don't know. My views might have changed if he's gone up against Chopper. But yeah, Paul Huberts, 38 games, 2006-07, 10 goals for the Lions in this particular season. This is rather middling season back in League One. Another name I've picked out here is Chris Hackett. I used to like Chris Hackett. I thought he was great kind of skillful, good deliverer of a cross, Chris Hackett, something we don't often see much of. Played for us between 2006 and 2012, 146 games and 6 goals, so he wasn't a great scorer, but he was a great crosser and I think a passer of the ball. Defensively, because he would play in that kind of defensive right side, sometimes fullback, sometimes midfield. Probably wasn't the greatest defensive player you'll ever have seen in your life, dear listeners. Just to read Neil's biography of Chris Hackett, and I think he's right here, a speedy and tricky winger. Chris started his career in his hometown of Oxford and arrived at the Den following an unhappy time in Scottish football with Heart Midlothian. He helped Millwall reach 2 playoff finals in his time at the club, coming off the bench on both occasions. But a succession of injuries curtailed further progress in his time at the Den. He went out on loan to get some game time in early 2012, but was released the following summer and joined Northampton, another player that went to Northampton. These days, he's a development coach at Oxford United. Yeah, I used to like Chris Hackett, and I do remember injury blighting his career with us before going out to Northampton. Funny you get little cycles of players leaving for certain clubs, isn't it? I remember, Northampton featured quite a bit in our lives at that point. And finally, one last player choice. I picked out Willie Guéret. I used to like Willie Guéret. A more honest professional I don't know I've ever seen, really, because how long was he with us? He was with us 2000 to 2004. He played just 19 games in that time because Tony Warner was obviously always first choice. He was understudy. But he was always ready and willing to take the goal if required. And he wasn't a bad goalkeeper either, Willie Julie Guéret, born in a place called Saint-Claude in France, 1973. His career took him Paris Saint-Germain, Red Star, Le Mans, Millwall, then Swansea. We've mentioned him already in the context of this game that we're looking at here in March 2007. Then MK Dons and Kettering to close his career. A former French under-19 international, Willie Guéret was an excellent handler and a handy shot stopper. He was. He spent most of his time at the Den, second to Tony Warner. After leaving the club, Willie went on to win the Welsh Cup with Swansea. I didn't know that. And win promotion from League Two with them as well. Later in his career, he won a league title with MK Dons, and this was the bit that really caught my eye. He now runs a cognac production company in France with his brother, Guillaume Guéret. I tried to find details and couldn't. It's all in French. My French runs out beyond ordering a cheese sandwich and a couple of beers and some crisps at the bar. After a certain point, my French just isn't there. I did see the name Guéret on a cognac website, but what I don't know that was Willie Guéret or Guillaume Guéret. But anyway, cut a long story short, he runs a cognac production company in France. Do you like cognac, dear listener? I'm not a great lover of it personally. I couldn't drink a lot of it, could you? I don't suppose you meant to go out and get arseholed on it, so maybe that I'm missing the point. But there we are, Willie Guéret playing for Swansea in this particular game. Millwall 2, Swansea City 0, 31st of March in League One in front of 9,249 at the Den. We'd finish in 10th position in League One this particular season. Now, the name of Willie Donachie doesn't get mentioned very often on our show, and he wasn't a terribly successful manager for us, in truth. He was only with us for a season, but I thought it might be nice just to mention Willie Donachie, because by all accounts, he's a very nice bloke. I did wonder whether, just going back to Paul Hubert's, fiery demeanour, whether that didn't sit well with Willie Donachie, who I understand is quite an affable, peaceful kind of guy. I might be making, adding 2 and 2 and making 7 or something in my mind, but I just wonder whether the whole kind of the fieriness of certain players didn't mean that Willie was well cut out for the world of football management. But anyway, that's pure conjecture. You can call bullshit on that if you want, dear listeners. He was an experienced footballer and an international player for Scotland. He'd played in two World Cups for Scotland, Willie Donachie, in the '74 West Germany World Cup and in Argentina, 1978. He played 351 appearances for Manchester City before moving on to America, Portland, Norwich, Burnley and Oldham. And then his managerial career, we were his first real, opportunity to be in the hot seat. I'm not sure he was terribly well cut out for it, listeners, because clearly he was a player that had seen and been around the track many, many times. He took over after Nigel Spackman was drummed out of town, and he was with us for a year as Millwall manager. Flirted with relegation, and then obviously the wheels will come off in 2000. I think with Kenny Jackett took over from him afterwards. But I was interested to see his career after leaving the Den. He seems to have gone into there's a whole football scene of managers and players that go to the smaller nations of the world. After leaving Millwall, he went on to manage Antigua and Barbuda in 2008. Some time as a coach and reserve manager at Newcastle, but then Temecula, which is a team in California in the minor soccer leagues in the US, and then managed Montserrat. Two spells as an international manager, as Antigua and then Montserrat, Caribbean nation, obviously. Currently, Montserrat are managed by Lee Bowyer and captained by Lyle Taylor. I didn't know that. Did you, dear listeners? I suppose you don't spend your life thinking about it. I didn't, unless I was doing this research. But yeah, managed by Willie Donachie from 2018 to 2022. It's an island that has been hugely affected by a volcanic explosion in the southern part of its territory. And if you look at the map on or any of the wiki pages about it, the southern half of the island is designated as an exclusion zone because of the damage caused by the eruption. The main city of Montserrat is called Plymouth and was totally devastated and is abandoned at the moment. Current news though on Willie Donachie, he was there from 2018 to 2022. At the moment, Willie Donachie has just been announced as the Southport FC women's team manager. The little biography here, fullback, talk about the World Cup finals, Manchester City legend. Assistant manager Joe Royle, last time Everton won a trophy in the 1995 FA Cup. But yeah, these days he's managing in the women's world for Southport. And it does say what a nice bloke he is. So I never met him. I did meet Spackman, but I never met Willie Donachie. I'm very impressed with Spackman. But I always thought that Willie Donachie was probably too nice for football management. And that's pure conjecture on my part. So let me know what you think, dear listeners. So yeah, at the moment he's managing Southport's women's side in the Women's National League. There we are, dear listeners. There's a bit of a ramshackle preview. I hope you've enjoyed it. I will be back after the game on Saturday, Mill versus Swansea. Let's hope for a win. We need a win. And it'd be lunacy if we find ourselves in the top six as a result of it. But I don't really care about that at the moment. What I do care about is we get the 3 points at home on Saturday. Do send me your voice notes. I'd love to get your voice notes. If we normally get a lot more for home games than we do away games, but you can use my on Twitter. You can send me a direct message. If you press direct message, there's a little squiggly line to send a voicemail message to me on Twitter at AchtungMillwall. Or if you got my mobile number, you can WhatsApp me a message. It's great to get any messages. And if we get enough of them, we'll do another show like I did last time, a little reaction show to the various messages. So really look forward to that. There we are. Thank you for listening. Hope you've enjoyed the preview, such as it is. And I will talk to you at the weekend. Until then, dear listeners, it's Arrivederci Millwall and bye for now. Yes, indeed. What a simple question. This was a rags to riches story. An Englishman who was over 27 when he made his debut in the Premier League. Only Ian Wright has made a debut later than this Leicester legend. Leicester legend, dear listeners, is the one and only Jamie Vardy. Of course, it's Jamie Vardy. You knew that, didn't you? Thank you for listening to the show. punditgames.co.uk. More of this kind of stuff in that wonderful quiz box. Thank you for listening. Arrivederci Millwall. Bye for now.